My name is Gina Solomon. I'm a clinical professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. Climate change and asthma are linked, but they're linked through 4 different pathways. Pathway 1 is that heat increases the levels of ozone smog in the air. We know that ozone causes asthma attacks. It's well established medically. So if you are an asthmatic, you already are having an attack or at risk of having an attack when the smog levels, the ozone levels go up high in the summers. That's just going to get worse with climate change. Second way that climate change is linked to asthma, ragweed and other allergens. There are studies that have shown if you grow weeds in greenhouses, and people have done this, with different concentrations of carbon dioxide in the air that mimic the concentrations we're going to have in our air in the future. Those plants at the higher carbon dioxide levels create more pollen. They grow richer, thicker, and they make a lot more pollen than the plants growing under today's conditions. That means that people who are allergic to ragweed and other common allergens are going to be much more at risk of having allergic and asthmatic attacks in the spring and summer in the future. The third way that climate change is linked to asthma, particulate matter from trucks and cars, power plants and industrial facilities. These are the same sources that emit greenhouse gases. They also emit something called black carbon and tiny little particles that get down deep into our lungs. Those particles warm the climate, but at the same time when we inhale them, they cause direct toxic effects to the air sacs or alveoli deep in our lungs. They reduce our ability to fight off infections, and they cause inflammation, and inflammation can result in asthma attacks. The fourth connection between climate change and asthma is wildfire. We have seen a huge increase in wildfires in California. Wildfires are not a new thing, but climate change will magnify them intensely, and we've already seen that happening. The reason that climate change will make fires worse is that we see oscillations between drought and heavy rains that causes the death of the trees and increases in undergrowth. Undergrowth is much more flammable. It's like kindling for fires. We also have seen invasive species like the bark beetle that are worsening the damage to trees. So now we have well over 100 million dead trees in California that are ripe for burning. Huge fires create huge plumes of smoke, and that smoke is incredibly irritating to the airways. As it penetrates deep into people's lungs, it causes inflammation, it causes the airways of asthmatics to spasm, and it can cause very severe asthma exacerbations. People end up in the hospital during wildfire events in large numbers. So what we've seen is 4 big links between climate change and asthma. Pathway 1 is ozone smog rising as the heat rises. Pathway 2 is the weeds that generate allergens that will be proliferating intensively as the climate warms and as CO2 levels in the air go up. Pathway 3, the same particulate matter that comes out of the petroleum burning sources that create greenhouse gases, also ending up in our lungs. And pathway 4, the particulate matter generated specifically by wildfires that are worsened by climate change. All of these will also tend to interact, which means that asthmatics going into the future will have one hit during the fall season from a wildfire, and then the spring, the ragweed will worsening their symptoms. In the summer, the ozone will worsening their symptoms in the summer. It becomes a year-round series of stressors that will just make it very harder and harder to control asthmatics. And keep them out of the hospital and feeling well.